Hi everyone, this is Ernie Reyna and this is my Week 5 submission for MPA 580, Legal and Ethical Issues with Dr. Telleria. So just a quick overview of what I'll be presenting today. I'll be putting together an intro to the agency that I'm working with on their stock ethics training course that's going to add some context to what they need to hear. We'll give an intro on why this ethics is important to the organization. We'll talk about some theoretical foundations on which these problems will be based on. We'll give the employees an overview why a code of ethics is important, and we'll provide an ethical scenario that might be encountered in the agency, and I'll provide my thoughts on this and how to address as well. So the question to ask is, why are ethics so important to an organization? And bottom line is ethics are important because there's something at stake, whether it be for you or for the organization. It's important to understand ethics and how they work and why they're around to protect us, essentially. And we can look at this using the readings in the textbook from Severa when he's talking about ethical analysis and our duty and our obligation to see something, say something, react, and take an ethical approach and make a decision on it. And those can be tied back to the videos that we've seen throughout the course of this lecture, of this session. There's categorical imperatives to talk about it, utilitarianism, contractarianism, and eudaimonia. There's different ways to look at this, but bottom line is that there's something at stake, and we want to ensure that in the public administration eyes that everything is the way it needs to be so that no one gets in trouble, whether it be yourself or the organization. And so you may be wondering why it is so important to talk about ethics and the reason why we're doing this. And so I want to give you some brief backgrounds on some theoretical foundations on which these ethics are based on. And so if we look at the Svevara book, we talk about ethics being both an individual and shared responsibility, not just on one or the other. We should be looking out for ourselves. There's 4 things that we really need to talk about, and that's the public interest, the relationships that we have with others and the public, your personal integrity, as well as performing tasks impartially without fear of retaliation. So those are 4 themes that we need to be aware of. But then in addition to that, the American Society for Public Administration really didn't adopt the code until 1984. And ASPA, if you will, is really the society that we look to for public administration. And so they kind of define ethics as something that's a well-based standard for what is right and what is wrong. So you'll know what that is when you get there, but that's the sense of why we're doing what we're doing now. And so beyond just ethics, there's also a code of ethics or a code of conduct in the way we should behave, in the way that we should act around individuals, and perception. And perception really is everything, and it's the way that we see ourselves doing things. But our self-perception can be distorted, as the video stated. And we want to make sure that we're not relying just on our own instincts to make sure something is correct. We don't want to give ourselves too much latitude, as the video indicated. And so we want to make sure that we're checking with others that we are doing the right thing and asking, hey, what would you do in this situation? Conversely, you also want to make sure that those around you are doing the right thing. And so we do have a responsibility to ensure that not only that we're doing the right thing, but others are as well. And if you see something, you should approach somebody and say, that might not be the best approach or way of doing things. So it is our responsibility to ensure that others are doing the right thing for the sake of our agency. So you want to make sure you're doing that as well. And so a great example of ethical scenario that you may encounter in this organization, or really any organization you go to, is utilizing what's known as Form 700s. Anytime you were to receive something from the public or a private entity, if you will, it may be something simple as a lunch, a free lunch. We need to keep track of that information. And so we have to report that on this Form 700. And so if you're to receive something that's greater in value of $50, if it equates to tickets to a baseball game or a basketball game that might be valued at $1,000 because it's a playoffs, it's important to do a couple different things. If the value is greater than, say, $600, you may have to turn those down because the value is too great, or pay for those on your own. It's important to keep track of those, but sometimes we can lose track of what's important and accept something from a private agency that we should not be accepting. And so that's an ethical situation that we have to be aware of, and making sure that we do the right thing in those scenarios. And so a way to address this ethical scenario with this Form 700 and receiving gifts is, as mentioned before, do one of 2 things. Keep track of all these items you do receive. If it's a lunch, just report them. make sure that everything that you do receive is reported on your Form 700. If it's a gift, we have to use good judgment and ensure that we're either tracking that, or we decline them, or we pay for them ourselves. Because the one thing you don't want to do is accept a gift amounting to something greater than, say, $500 or $600 that you cannot accept. That would be a violation of these Form 700, which is also an ethical matter, because we're essentially being persuaded by a private agency to accept gifts for doing something in return. So it's really an ethics problem that we have to address in that matter. So there's different ways to go about it. You either keep really great track of it, you pay for it yourself, or you decline the gift. But we want to make sure that we're doing the proper thing so that all ethical approaches are being taken in that scenario. And that concludes my discussion board. I'm happy to hear any thoughts you may have on it. Thank you so much.